welcome to the Aces Up Your Sleeve podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Cade.
And I'm the other of your hosts, Sabrina.
As a disclaimer, this podcast is not therapeutic advice. It's what we might do if we were in your position and our thoughts on certain situations. We do have a guest with us today to talk about mixed neurotype relationships. We've got Kyle Rutherford, an LMFT-Associate. He's a therapist, a partner in a neurodiverse relationship, and a proud ADHDer with a deep appreciation for the beautifully complex ways our brains work. He's also a highly sensitive person. Kyle enjoys spending time with friends and his partner, who happens to be autistic, playing complex board games, 3D printing, and being outside. Professionally, Kyle loves working with neurodiverse relationships in whatever form they may take and supporting neurodivergent individuals with complex trauma. He works at the Rooted Brain PLLC located in Austin, Texas, and he can also work with folks in person there and online throughout the state of Texas. Glad to have you here with us today, Kyle.
Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're excited to talk relationship stuff. We always get some questions on these topics, and we've pulled a few from Reddit as well. So for our main episode content here, we're going to cover the relationships in general, and I think on our bonus content, we'll cover breakups and how do you navigate all the stuff that comes with that.
And
The
I
messy
think,
part of being a human, huh?
yeah, I think all three of us are in some form of a neurodiverse relationship, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool. So it'll be interesting.
So to start, we've got kind of a long one. Sabrina, you want to give it a go?
Sure. Okay, so the first question is mainly about being in a relationship where both partners are neurodivergent to different degrees. So this question asker says, both neurodivergent. I have a learning disability and PTSD. We've been quote unquote together, sort of, since about October. Communication has always been difficult. He almost never initiates anything. We live in different cities. My mother passed away and he didn't even phone to offer condolences. I understand communication is an issue with people on the spectrum, but there's a bare minimum, or am I expecting too much? I too am neurodivergent. Communication and social interaction does not come easy for me, but isn't offering sympathies when a family member of someone you care about passes basic common decency thing? Am I expecting too much? How lenient should we be of someone on the spectrum? Is it okay to have basic expectations? When his father passed, I offered my sympathies. I was there for him while also giving him space to mourn / grieve. He's just not there at all. He's not a bad person. The opposite is true. I'm feeling conflicted. On the one hand, I don't want to chuck this in the bin, but on the other hand, talking to him about something so basic is just too draining for me right now. Any thoughts would be appreciated. Thank you in advance. So it's a big one. I had lots of feelings when I was reading it first.
What feelings came up for you?
So I think that there's a lot of expectation. Just as a big, broad, general word, there's a lot of am I expecting too much or am I being unreasonable? And that's just such a big or versus I have the expectations I have and this is the person that he is and finding a natural middle ground. How about y'all?
The thing that came up for me here is preferences in communication, where more neurotypical leaning people tend to favor implicit communication, where it's there's some value assumed in you get me without me having to tell you exactly what's happening. It's somehow that says, you really understand me. You see me, you get me. I feel valued or appreciated, that kind of thing. And when we talk about I can speak for myself in my own relationship and what I've seen in my couples that I tend to work with that are neurodiverse. But direct communication might be more of the way that they want to handle things. And because it's more clear and there's less guesswork. It's really confusing to have to navigate it when it sometimes feels like we are dropped into a relationship or a social situation where the rules aren't so clear and everyone else seems to know how to play the game, but it's I don't know what's going on. And then it becomes our problem to deal with that. So like you said, Sabrina, if there's an expectation, maybe the expectation should be talked about. And that's not because the other person doesn't care, but maybe they just don't know.
Yeah. Really stood out to me that, am I expecting too much? That piece of the question, Not necessarily, but did you communicate those expectations, or did you let him know that, hey, I'm going to need you to reach out more? I'm going to specifically need a phone call. Even though that's what she did for him, he might be like, well, she hates using the phone, so maybe I'm not going to give a call.
Mm,
But she's over there like, well, I called him. Why is he not calling me? It's so hard.
Yeah, I also think that there's like this idea of common basic decency. You could ask any person I've ever interacted with, really, to be honest. I hate the idea of like common sense, common decency, all those things. It's like you could go to every house on my block and each one of them would have different expectations about eye contact, about do you respond verbally when somebody says something to you, or is a head shake enough? Like all of those types of things are very much not common, quote unquote, sense. They're
mm,
different depending on how you were raised, and that's going to be dependent on how the people that raised you were raised, and on and on and on. And so like I don't think that like offering sympathies when a family member of someone that you care about passes is like common decency. I think that if you want that from someone, it is important to let them know. And if you are hurt by them not offering it, that's also important.
mm.
Even when it's like talking about something again so basic. It's not basic for everyone. Is just too draining. That's totally fair. That also might mean that there is some form of a mismatch happening. And I also think like so this whole episode we're talking about like neurodiverse relationships, right? Relationships where there is more than one neurotype present. And it seems to be that there's like some autism in this relationship, and then also PTSD. And we don't know what type of PTSD, we don't know, the details of that, but there can be a lot of kind of like, I need more felt safety if I have PTSD. And it might be some form of a relational PTSD or something like that, where it's like, I'm not getting what I need. And that also has to do with your neurodivergencies, but that also doesn't change his.
Yeah,
You
that's a
know?
really good point. And especially when we're talking about that, if that PTSD was relational in some way, there's, regardless if that's there or not, but anytime we have a relationship, two people, romantic or not, there's the message that is intended to be sent, and then there's the message that is received.
Mm-hmm.
Often when there's complications, it's because there's a mismatch there. And our earlier life experiences, past relational history, how our brain's wired, those all play a role in how we receive the information. Maybe to this partner that didn't say anything, they have a history of reaching out to someone and when they were grieving and they got pushed away.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe for the other partner who's grieving and has PTSD, like when someone doesn't reach out to them, it tells them that they don't care because they were
Mm-hmm.
neglected before. So there's like this hyper vigilance that comes out to like be on the lookout for, I'm going to get let down again. So we see it
Mm-hmm.
everywhere.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah, I
not to
love.
invalidate that experience, but to say that it makes sense that it's there. We just
Yeah.
need to talk it out.
Yeah, and I love in this question too that the person who wrote it is saying he's not a bad person. The opposite is true. I'm just feeling conflicted, recognizing that like this is not a value judgment about the partner, that they aren't showing up in the ways that the question asker needs. How do you feel, Kyle, about the, I don't want to chuck this in the bin, but on the other hand, talking to him about something so basic is just too draining. If you had,
Mm,
a couple come into you that's like, should we throw this relationship in the bin? What do we do? What are your thoughts on that?
mm. And my original or not original my first thought here is that is a pretty drastic swing from we either throw it in the bin or it should be assumed. Seems like maybe a more helpful middle ground will be somewhere in the middle where we're like,
Mm-hmm.
this hurt. Tell me about the reasons it hurt. That makes a lot of sense and work from there. And if the other partner's not willing to meet them and understand or seek to understand and make an adaptation, then maybe it isn't the right fit and it needs to get moved on from or thrown in the bin, as they would say. Uh, but my guess is that this person sounds like a really nice human that the writer said like is the opposite of I don't know how they framed it, but um, that they're a wonderful human being, and maybe just a little grace in like, can we meet somewhere in the middle instead of expecting them to mind read everything? Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that the question does read like there's a lot of black and white. Either like there's a bare minimum, or I'm expecting too much. Either, like there's all of this kind of like, either they have a right to act like this, or I have a right to be upset with it, and there's not like space for both to be true.
Yeah.
I'm a DBT therapist at heart, and so like my whole brain is just going like,
oh yeah,
there's more to it.
Yeah. One of
You
my
do
favorite
different.
things with couples is like starting to instill the power of and.
Mhm.
Both of these things can exist at the same time, and they're both true.
Yep.
I could feel hurt by my partner not reaching out to me, and also I expect like some sort of reciprocity and care, and I understand that maybe it doesn't come easily to them. It's
Or
not
like the way that I feel care is not the way that they show care. And so we have to find a middle ground where we can speak that same language together instead of like basically fighting each other on it.
Yeah. And where this gets difficult for neurodiverse couples in particular is generally there's a history of being misunderstood. And so there's an understandable protectiveness there of like, I can't go to this person and tell them that I'm hurt by this because they're not going to understand. They're going to push me away. They're going to make it my fault. So it's better to just throw it in the bin.
Yeah. I think even that idea of like talking about something so basic is just too draining. I think that trying to remind yourself that it's not actually super basic, that like it clearly is not something that he is thinking of in that way. And so that could make it a little less draining, but also recognizing that like it is important to fill our own cup enough to have tough conversations, but sometimes we presume a conversation's tougher than it is, like, or it's going to be tougher than it is, right? That like we can't tell the future. And this is a rule with all my clients and also all of the listeners here. If you can start telling the future, you have to send me Powerball numbers. I want to be rich.
I love that.
Thank you. It's great. And so like, if somehow she can tell the future, she can tell, yep, this is going to be like, okay, fine. Send me Powerball numbers and have your anxiety. But like, no, realistically, you don't know that it's actually going to be as bad as you feel like it's going to be. You are grieving, like this is hard, but that's also something that hopefully they would take into account. Hey, I'm grieving and I don't actually have the energy for this to be a big conversation. What I'm asking for you right now is just to ask me how I'm doing once or twice a day, and we can have a bigger conversation when I'm a little bit more out of that.
Yeah. And one of the strengths of autism is that autistic individuals tend to have higher systematized thinking. So if we make it super clear what we're needing and like outline it very well, they tend to follow it, right?
Make that
it's
shit
like,
a SMART goal.
Yeah, exactly. And it once it is internalized, it's like they're the best at following through.
Yeah.
That actually brings us a little to our next question. Do you guys think that neurodivergents should date other neurodivergents? There's some background to this, but before someone thinks I'm trying some kind of segregation, no. I just want to know if you guys think that relationships tend to be better for neurodivergent people when they date other neurodivergent people.
My first thought on this one is both yes and no. Again, speaking from experience myself and also what I've seen, it's like sometimes a clash of sensory needs that makes it harder, or different preferences for communication or touch or reassurance or different needs in the relationship that tend to be heightened when they're both neurodivergent. And for some people, having the diversity in brain wiring, whether it be like a neurotypical and autistic or a neurotypical ADHD or whatever constellation that is, you get like someone who grounds the other person, someone who's imaginative, a visionary, and a realist, and you can complement each other. And then also that could clash as well. So like all relationships, the complementing of each other is awesome for balance, and it can also be a source of conflict.
Yeah, and there are so many unique combinations of all those qualities and traits that it's hard to blanket say like, yeah, it's going to be so much easier and better. Not depends on the
That
people.
umbrella is huge.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of the problem. Like, so in my partnership, I'm autistic, borderline, ADHD, like CPTSD. My partner is OCD, ADHD, autistic, and CPTSD. And so, like, there's just, it doesn't make things like unilaterally better or unilaterally worse. It makes things different. And like, we have particularly clashing traumas in some ways, right? Where like, oh, you said that this way, and then I replied that way because you, and then we're all like squidged up against our traumas. And it's like, well, that was an experience. And, you know, like, there are also a lot of ways in which things do, like, we'll often make jokes like we're living in the same brain. Like, we both we'll be like driving on the highway and we'll pass a car and we'll both kind of go and we'll be like, oh, that one bumper sticker on that car 4 cars over that like we both happened to see and had the same thought about. Yup. And like, you know, whether that's neurotype or not, like I do think that there are nice things about being very similar to someone, and there are ways that that can be really sandpapery really quickly.
Yeah. And to link it back to where we were before too, it's like when two neurodivergent people are in a relationship, we sometimes skip over that hurdle of assumed understanding. And it's like, oh, it's much more easy to open up and say, this is what my sensory needs are. This is where I get stuck. This is part that I don't quite understand. And it feels like it's easier to say that because they probably have experienced that too. And if for me, it's like I can sometimes just get going and I need my partner to help bring me down. And it's easier for me to say that to her when she has a similar experience rather than like, let's say a neurotypical partner that doesn't understand that. And they're like, why are you running around the house? And I thought we were supposed to go to bed an hour ago. And I'm like, well, I started doing the laundry and then I started doing the dishes and then I started doing this other thing and now I'm working on the 3D printing and then it got jammed and then now I'm at my desk again and I forgot what I was doing.
Yeah, I think that like almost not always unspoken, but just being on that different level with someone quicker because there's less to explain. It reminds me of a lot of trans folks will date T for T, so trans for trans. And it allows you in some ways to skip past some of that really rudimentary, like educational, informational stuff. However, that's not always the case because everyone is at different points in their journey with gender and their vocabulary and their experiences. So I think that kind of parallels here too. That, you know, I've dated many neurodivergent people in the past who were neurodivergent in different ways than I am, but neither of us knew, and so it was just not great.
Yeah.
I also think that there's like the double-sided coin of, and this is something that my partner and I have worked through a lot in the past like year and a half, is like, because our brains work so similarly, we often make a lot more assumptions than we would with someone else, where it's like, oh yeah, like because we live in the same brain, you meant this way. And I know that because we always think the same way. And it's like, no, I didn't mean that like that at all. That was not like, that never crossed my brain. And so there's that kind of like, oh, once we start thinking like, you know, there's so much similarity here, or with another autistic person, I don't have to explain why I don't want the lights on. I can just go turn them off. And it's like, maybe, or your partner is fucking half blind like mine is, and as much as I don't want any lights on, they're like, I literally can't see and we'll fall down these stairs now. Blah, 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 blah. And it's like, great, that's not what anyone wanted tonight. And so it's like, oh, it actually takes an extra step of like, I have to be more intentional about explaining because it doesn't feel like I have to in a lot of other circumstances.
Yeah,
I love the nuance there.
Yeah.
I will
so
say
it doesn't sound like we're a firm yes or no on this one.
I don't think there is possible to say yes or no on this one.
I agree.
No. And another topic that usually gets mentioned when I see questions like this or discourse like this out online or in person in groups people want to know a little bit about attachment style and what role
Mm.
that plays. I don't know, Kyle, if you have anything you want to share about what you've noticed for neurodiverse couples and attachment and how that plays out, or if that's way too big of a question.
It's its own podcast.
It definitely has the depth and breadth, if I'm using those terms correctly, to be its own podcast, but I can give a brief on what I've seen. And to be honest, it's not much different. I think attachment
Mhm.
is innate to being human and could be, it intersects with how our brains are wired and how we process sensory information, but it's part of being a person.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also think that attachment trauma goes into several neurodivergencies. Like,
Definitely.
it is the base of most of the cluster B,
Yeah.
quote unquote, personality disorders. And so, when it's like, yeah, a lot of us come with attachment trauma in one way or another. And so I think that there's a lot of like relationship building is so intentional. And then for people who have had such relational traumas, whether that is attachment or even just like being bullied all through school or being misunderstood or like feeling like an
Mhm.
outcast, there's like, are you going to do the same thing to me? Am I going to do it to you? Like, oh, like I know a lot of my, especially like ADHD, autistic, borderline like clients like are really like, I don't want to do to them, like I don't want to make them feel like how I've been made to feel. And so there's
Yeah.
like almost extra caretaking and extra like people pleasing that starts turning online, and it's like, whoa, that also is not going to build health. Wait, we gotta do something different.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of interesting, I think, little ways that it like sneaks in.
Hmm. And I think everyone loves to throw people into boxes, and we like to, this person's avoidant, this person's anxious, this person's disorganized. And as much as that's helpful in understanding frameworks, I often don't even bring it up in sessions with clients.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's particularly
It's like a
helpful.
case conceptualization, but
Yeah,
not an
for sure.
actual. Yeah.
Because uh, it feels limiting. I mean, also we tend to be more anxious in one relationship and more avoidant in others. And even within one relationship, there's moments where even I am more anxious, and then in other circumstances, the topic at hand, I'm getting the fuck out of there. I'm avoiding that like the plague. And there's different parts of me that get brought online for different circumstances. And even as I'm saying this, I know it's such a therapist answer to be like, it's more nuanced than that. It's never one thing. Um, but yeah, but where I was going with this is I've seen a lot of misconception and mislabeling of particularly like autistic males as being avoidant. Like they don't have any emotion. They're going to pull away. They're not going to be whatever it is. And that is unfair from what I've seen. Like, again, we're throwing people in the boxes that have not been curious enough to see what it's actually like for them. Because I've seen it on both sides and alternating. And it really depends on the couple, the person, and the situation.
Yeah, and I think a lot of those old stereotypes kind of feed into
Yeah.
continuing that. Yeah, that's tough. It sort of leads us into our next one. Something else we've got here is why is most current mixed neurotype advice about autistic men dating allistic women? Where can the rest of us go to find support and information that represents us?
I think this is playing into that stereotype of the Cassandra syndrome, which, Kate, if you want to give a brief on that, I'm familiar, but I don't have the words at the moment to describe it.
And I'm spacing on the exact, like, I believe it's Greek mythology that it stems from, but essentially there was this phrase, Cassandra syndrome, that got thrown around a lot a couple decades ago, and it still gets brought up, but it was representing primarily autistic men with allistic women, and the women were saying, my partner is kind of like what you were describing, too avoidant or detached or cold or withdrawn or not meeting my emotional needs or not showing these things in the way that I need them, and I'm abused by that. And I feel like an abuse victim. And so support groups would form. There's lots of books and writing on it. So all that to say, that stigma still gets perpetuated, and there's a lot of resources from a few decades now, and like we just haven't caught up, in my opinion. We haven't caught up on diversity and making sure other mixed neurotype relationships are represented. What do you think?
I think that again, it's easy to fall back on the stereotype because it's just the most talked about. But like you said, there is so many different constellations of neurotypes, and especially in relationships. I think that often a problem here is what I would call and is referred to as the double empathy problem, where it's like typically the neurotypical person, said typically twice, is assuming that the deficiency is in the neurodivergent partner, in this case, the autistic male, as in they don't understand my emotions. That's their problem. I'm being abused by this, or I feel like a victim that is never validated. They don't understand my emotions and they don't want to, which being in that spot, yeah, I would probably feel horrible. That makes sense. And there's a gap in building the empathy both directions.
Yeah.
Like we're both needing things in this relationship that are not being talked about, both sensory wise, attachment wise, and learning to meet in the middle is one of the goals of neurodiverse therapy and in general couples therapy. The empathy cannot only go one direction. We got to understand each other fundamentally. And that starts with learning how we each work and our typical patterns and the sensory portions of our experience that maybe don't make sense to the other partner, and getting curious there.
And strengthening that communication, whatever form that needs to be, to get that deeper understanding of each other. Sometimes having that mediator, the couples counselor, or the Kyle in the room to help like translate and help explain and explore can be really helpful. More so than just reading a book.
Yeah, and I love how you said translate, because sometimes I do feel like I'm a translator where I'm not doing a lot of like interventions. You could say all I'm doing is this is what I'm hearing and putting into words that resonate with the other partner until enough repetitions of that, and we can find the language that works for both of them. Yeah, and sometimes that takes being creative and talking in colors and textures and in songs. I mean, I love asking couples to both bring in a song that represents what it feels like either in this specific instance or in this relationship, and just having the other person listen to it. What did that bring up for you?
Yeah, that's gotta be powerful.
Music touches us in a way that words don't sometimes.
That's beautiful, yeah.
A little bit of tech issues there. Sorry. So I might have missed this, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think there's an actual genuine, very big answer about why the information is typically about autistic men and allistic women, because we didn't know how to diagnose, like we weren't diagnosing women until recently. And so it was like men were being diagnosed. And then I think like Kyle was saying, as I came back in, are like, hey, here, I can't communicate. So that should be someone else's problem. And women weren't getting diagnosed. And so there wasn't a lot of conversation on, oh, what if both people are autistic? What if the woman is ADHD and the man's autistic? What if the woman is autistic and the man is allistic? What if there are no men? You know, like there's like a whole lot of different ways, but like in a heteronormative society and in a society that does not accurately diagnose half the population, you're going to end up with like a really heavily weighted version of who is making resources and how they're making them and what we're assuming about couples in general.
Yeah, that's right. And also, I'll point out here that part of this is maintained through how society treats men and women, especially socializing them. So, and a lot of these symptoms are just missed because how women tend to be socialized, and it's so much easier for them to get missed in the diagnosis process.
Even like, from that first question, you know, like oh, these are common things. No, these are things that like as a femme person, you were probably taught that you have to reach out to someone who has lost
that's
someone.
right.
That's not optional, right? That you need to send thank you cards and get better cards and all those things, where your masked partner probably wasn't.
Yeah, especially that comfort piece that usually falls on someone who is seen as maternal.
That's right.
Yeah. So all good reasons to you know, if you are listening and you're somebody who's struggling a little bit or just want to do a little relationship checkup or tune up, might be worth checking in with a couples counselor, especially somebody who specializes in the mixed neurotype couples or relationship dynamics and constellations, because working with someone who doesn't, they might be going off of some of that old research, some of the books that are already out there. We talked about gender norms, but they're also normed primarily on white folks. So if you are not like a white cis het and you're in a couple, and it may be more useful to have someone who can be dynamic and have some cultural humility and use some resources to really tailor that treatment instead of looking at maybe something written in the 90s.
Yeah.
And to get like creative. Like I loved the idea of like, oh, bring in a song. I do that with clients who deal with like alexithymia a lot. Is like, we're not going to be able to sit here and just like pull a feeling wheel up and find something. So find me a song, find me a movie, find me a book or a color or whatever. And that's what we can like kind of go off of. But that takes an individual therapist who's talking to you directly. That takes a coach, that takes a, whatever kind of an individual person who is talking to who you are and who your partnership is, and not the biggest, widest, generalist group of people who will pay money for a book.
Yeah. Yeah. And the second part of that question being like, where can we go to find this information, and like, how do we get support that we need that isn't talked about in like these different neurotype relationships? And I would say like, find someone who is willing to get to know you and your partner, who's has some background in neurodivergence, and is willing to see you as an individual rather than a caricatured version of who you are.
Yeah. Or listen to our podcast.
Exactly.
Yeah, check in with us. I was going to say, I also love community for an answer for this one. Not that you're always going to get the best advice on social media, Reddit, Facebook, wherever, but if you're with other people who have some of that lived experience, they might at least be able to share, oh, something similar happened for me and my partners. Here's what we did. And then you can kind of take it or leave it. You'll know what'll work or won't work for your dynamics best.
Yeah.
And this is where I might throw in, it's super helpful to find other people who have a similar lived experience to you, and just to like see how they handle it. And not everyone online is a mental health professional, so take it all with a grain of salt.
Yeah,
like,
and
take
also
a
the people
composite
online
of what's helpful for you, and don't believe everything you can see.
Yeah, take it as a like, kind of like how we talk about this podcast, right? This is not therapy, it's not therapeutic advice, right? And you can take what's helpful and leave the rest, right? Like, instead of having it be like, oh, well, that stopped being how I feel about it or how I experience it at this point, and so that means the whole thing is bad and wrong. No, it just means that some of it's not helpful to you. You can leave that part. You can take what is helpful.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us, Kyle. We're going to have you on the bonus content where we're talking navigating breakups next. For our listeners, you can expect new episodes weekly on Tuesdays. You can find Kyle at therootedbraintherapy.com. Again, he's able to work with folks in Texas. You can find me over at cryptidlearns.com or on Facebook or Instagram at cryptidlearns. And you can find Sabrina at radicalinsightsconsulting.com or on Facebook or Instagram at radicalinsightsconsulting. If you have any questions for us, please visit us over at neurokink.org/AUYS and send it our way. And we're going to jump over to the Patreon to record Hit Me Again, our exclusive guest bonus content. And we'll be talking about how to navigate ending a relationship and how to deal with breakups as an autistic or ADHDer. You can find that over at patreon.com/acesupyoursleeve podcast. We hope to see you there.